Alrighty, well, thank you guys for joining in today. It's not a bad day out, and hopefully the weather sticks around. We have Mr. Cooper here joining us, along with Landon, our vice president, and Dr. Kaminsky as well. And just want to say, hope everybody's staying safe, and I'll hand it off to Landon.
Yeah, okay. Special guest today, we got Bland Cooper. Bland has spent the last 15 years as a competitions agronomy official for the PGA TOUR. In that role, his responsibilities involve working collaboratively with host sites, members of the competitions committee, television partners, and operations staffs in providing and managing course conditions for PGA TOUR sanctioned events. Some of his assigned events include the host sites for the Arnold Palmer Invitational, presented by the MasterCard, and the Wyndham Championship and the Tour Championship. In the mid-1990s until 2000, Bland was the director of golf course operations at facilities in Charlotte, North Carolina, and Atlanta, GA and Georgia areas. In addition to his previous listed duties, Bland also performed agronomic consultations for many prestigious golf clubs throughout the country. A former member of the board directors for the Carolinas CGSA, he also teaches seminars relative to golf course management at both the regional and national levels. Please welcome Bland Cooper.
Thank you, Landon, Kyle, and Dr. Kaminsky for having me. Landon, in reading that, you reminded me just how old I am. So,
Hey, Bland, I wanted to step in for 1 second and just remind everybody that's in here. If you do have a question and you're listening, there's a Q&A section that you can put your questions in. There's a chat section too, but that tends to get a little bit busy sometimes. So if you have a specific question, feel free to put it in the Q&A and I'll kind of interrupt the presentation and ask the question for you. So sorry, Bland, you're on.
No, please do. Listen, I can put myself to sleep, listen to myself talk. So you'll interrupt, and if you see something you have a question about or you disagree with, or just by all means step in there. So as Landon said, you kind of explain what we do for a living. For the longest time, everybody knows what the PGA Tour is, obviously, but what we do as agronomists for up until recently, really, we've been kind of the Oz behind the curtain, if you will, and cloak and dagger in this secretive society, and it really wasn't meant to be that way. I think what we all kind of approach our job as is, in essence, we kind of serve the purpose of being referees. And if those of you who watch other sports, if a referee is getting a lot of attention, that means they're probably making mistakes. And so our MO for our department for years and years has been to kind of undersell, over-deliver, and not get overexposed. But here in the last several years, with the advent and the maturation of social media, we've been able to kind of at least announce our presence a little bit more and make people just understand that, hey, look, we're not, when we go to these golf courses, we're not dictators. We don't want to show up and, you get a site that's hosting an event for the first time, and there's always this anxiety or apprehension. Oh no, the PGA Tour is going to come in here and they're going to turn us upside down and shake all of our change out of our pockets and change everything we're doing. And that's not the case. We really want to be good guests. Unlike other golf organizations that may play a host site every 10 or 12 years, we go back to the same sites virtually every year, and we want to be welcomed back every year. And so we want to make sure that we're good stewards of that product while we are there. And so as we kind of move into some of the names, I'm not sure how many of y'all have volunteered at tournaments before. I know Dr. Kaminsky has done a fantastic job at getting the students involved at the players and at the Tour Championship, and a couple of years ago at Bay Hill, which those volunteer opportunities certainly are much appreciated by what we do. It brings you young people into the fray and really helps us to provide the conditions that we do. If you look at that screen or slide on the screen there, our competition or agronomy staff is broken up into two different departments. We have a competition staff. You see those individuals on that page. Those of us who are in competitions, that's all we do is competitions. And each person on that page does anywhere from 10 to 12 events a year. And in doing that, we're gone probably about 160 to 175 days a year a piece. And then the other branch of our department, you can see that there, Collier Miller, is the TPC side of things. And those of you, I'm sure, know the TPC network. There are a number of courses that we own that we have a lot of direct involvement with. And then there are other courses that we have licensee or franchise agreements with that we still have to oversee in terms of making sure there's a standard of maintenance associated with those. And so those 4 individuals oversee the TPC network. And in addition to that, Mark Johnson also is the director of agronomy for the Latino America Tour, and the Dennis Ingram over the McKenzie, the Canadian Tour, and the China Tour, which, as we all know, are kind of in a holding pattern right now. This gives you an example. Well, this shows you all of the tours that fall under the PGA TOUR umbrella. So those 6 tours we own and operate. And as agronomists, we provide agronomic support to each of those sites. And I think company-wide, we provide support for a little over 150 courses or 50 tournaments per year. That number, you give or take 5 or 10 maybe, but it's quite a number of events. It's not uncommon to have 7 or 8 agronomists in the field at any one time, and sometimes even more than that during the middle of the season. As Landon said in my bio, some of the events that I've assigned is obviously Bay Hill there, the Arnold Palmer Invitational, which Dr. Kaminsky, I'm not sure how many of you came down and volunteered there 2 years ago, but if you did, we certainly appreciate it. Harbor Town Golf Links, where we play the RBC Heritage, that I'm very excited to. Those of you who've been following this morning, we finally announced a schedule. And so that was a tournament we had canceled until 21, but we had a date that opened up with the US Open getting moved. And so we're now going to play that event the middle of June. Can everybody still hear me okay? I'm getting a connection unstable. Am I good, John?
You broke up for a second, but you sound okay now. So okay. It is what it is, but you're back on.
Okay. All right, but if I start breaking up, just stop me. I'll try another connection. The Wyndham Championship, which is in Greensboro, North Carolina. It's the last tournament we play right before the FedEx Cup playoffs begin. That's again, old Donald Ross golf course there. Quail Hollow for the Wells Fargo Championship. And then some of you have probably been to the Tour Championship at East Lake Golf Club. I know this past year it didn't work out with your schedules, but I'm hoping that in the future we'll be able to get the Penn State students back to that site. Also worked Sanderson Farm Championship, which is one of the fall events, and then I end up my season at the RSM Classic down at Sea Island. The other ones I worked also, but those are some of the ones that I highlighted. Yeah, I get questioned a lot about our course conditioning standards and who sets those, and who determines green speeds and rough height of cuts, and how the golf course is going to be played any given week. And it's really a collaborative effort between the agronomist assigned the event, the advanced rules official who's assigned the event, and then these 3 gentlemen on your screen here, Mark Russell on the bottom left, Gary Young in the middle, and Slugger White on the right. Those are our tournament directors. And so any given week, one of those 3 individuals is the tournament director at a site. The puck stops with them. They are responsible for the entire competition. They are the only person on site who has the ability to stop a golf tournament. Okay, and so really between whoever the tournament director is, assign that event, and the agronomist and the rules official, we determine, given the limitations maybe a facility has, what our green speed is going to be and how firm we want to play it, and what's our rough height of cut going to be? What are we trying to accomplish out of this setup? And so it kind of starts there. And then as time goes on, as we play events year over year, we'll certainly make some modifications to it as we see fit. But there's a big misconception out there that it's this thing is run by a committee of 30, 40 people. It's really not. It's not that complicated. We're not trying to put a man on the moon here. We're just trying to prepare a golf course, right? We do have a player advisory council. You can see the gentleman on it. This is a rotating board, if you will. I think they're 2-year terms. Now, these individuals don't necessarily get involved so much in course setup and course conditioning. They're more involved in in dealing with things like eligibility requirements and size of fields and those type things. However, from time to time, they may comment on something setup wise or condition wise if they didn't like it. You know, we certainly listen to them, and if it's you know, if the entire group is complaining about something, then we probably missed the boat. But if we get one or two people complaining about it, then we kind of do what we have to do and set it up for the entire field and not for one or two people. Jumping, you know, this seems like forever ago when we started this wraparound schedule. For those of you who don't know what this is, you know, for years we played the playoff events and the Tour Championship in the month of September. I live in the South. When September rolls around, we watch college football, and that's just what we do. And I know at Penn State, you guys are watching Nittany Lion football on Saturdays, and you're probably watching Eagles football on Sunday, and nobody's watching golf. Full disclosure, when football season kicked off, I didn't watch golf either, even when I was at a tournament. So we made some changes to the schedule for last year, and we pushed forward all the playoff events. And in doing so, what we're trying to accomplish is getting out of competing with football and getting some of our biggest events, our two playoff events and the Tour Championship, into the month of August. And in doing that, you probably all, those of you who follow, you know, we had to take the PGA Championship and move it to May, and then took the Players Championship and moved it to March. And we had a couple of tournaments that we had to push from the early part of the year into the fall schedule. It worked out phenomenally. Our TV ratings were through the roof. Everybody in Pond Leader Beach headquarters was ecstatic. FedEx was ecstatic. All of our other sponsors were ecstatic. And it led to another TV deal that we're going to that goes into play in 2022. That's an incredibly lucrative deal for the tour. It increases our income annually over $400 million a year. So everybody at the tour is happy, except for the agronomy staff, because what happened with that is that we had to take these events that a lot of them played in the Northeast in the month of September, which following a summer, at least you give these courses a little bit of a chance to kind of recuperate from an average summer, which is typically a hard summer, right? And bent grass, cool season grasses don't like it. And even though you can keep grass on the surfaces, it's not necessarily a competitive surface in that the root systems are compromised, and you guys all know this. And so last year we started out the playoffs, the NW Championship at Medina. Those of you who have ever been to Medina, it's a very hard golf course. It's one of Reese's toughest golf courses that he ever designed. And it was in as good a shape as you could possibly have it for the month of August. No question about it. The staff did a fantastic job. Unfortunately, it was the month of August. You throw a little bit of rain into the equation, and the golf course just really wasn't as competitive as we wanted. I think Justin Thomas was like 24, something under par. And Medina is not the type of golf course where anybody should be shooting 24 under par on. So then we go to the next week, to Liberty National. Again, in excellent shape for the month of August, but it's in the month of August, and a little bit of weather thrown in, and the conditions were, for a large part of the competition, receptive and soft. And so then we slide into the Tour Championship in Atlanta. Thankfully, we have warm season grasses there, but it's still very hot. And although we avoided any heavy rain, we did have, some of you may remember, the lightning issue. Thankfully, nobody was seriously hurt. It was definitely scary there for a while. But I remember that week when the commissioner came into town, I had just read an article or seen something on the internet about the three cities that are responsible for the most flight delays due to weather in the month of August. And they're Chicago and New York and Atlanta. Well, guess where we play these three events? We play Chicago, New York, and Atlanta. So if those airports are having the most flight delays due to weather, the chance of getting through a 7 or 8 day period without any significant rainfall is pretty slim. And unfortunately, there's no answer to this. It's just what it's going to be moving forward, and everybody's very happy with it, except the additional challenge that it puts on on our staff and certainly the superintendents at these golf courses. But it's just the way it's going to be. And television drives everything. Without the television component of this, there is no PGA Tour, right? I mean, the large bulk of our revenue, a large majority of our revenue is from our TV contracts. So those are definitely challenges. I had a lot of other challenges to talk to you about the schedule, but they all kind of obviously morph what we're going through right now, and all these other challenges with dead grass and winter kill, if there is some, or salt intrusion or things like that, are they just kind of take a back seat. And I know everybody's is having to deal with this COVID-19 issue. We certainly are. I mean, announcing our schedule today, a revised schedule. I'll be shocked if we don't have another revision to it or multiple revisions to it as the year goes on, based on these dynamic conditions that we're in. I think everybody within our company right now is trying to figure out how to get back and do this as safely as we possibly can without exposing anyone unnecessarily to this. And we've got a lot of different scenarios being played around. We've got to obviously get on-site testing. That has to be, it's got to be part and parcel to any type of schedule that we have. Now that sounds easy. You start thinking about, well, it's just some players and caddies and a couple of staff, but at a PGA Tour event, without any spectators at all, just players, caddies, supporting staff, television, and then operations staff, tournament staff, we will have in excess of 1,400 people between all those folks that will be there, and that's a lot of people. And so, coming up with a way to accurately and real-time test everybody when they show up on site is something that we've been told we're going to have in place. So, hopefully, what's going to happen? Player gets there, a caddy gets there. If we have volunteers that get there before they come in contact with anybody, they're going to get tested. Because we all know this, you could be asymptomatic and not even have it and still spread it. So we want to make sure that everybody's negative before we then turn them loose on the golf course. And I think that's and we'll get there. We're going to, if we have to buy an Abbott's machine and put an on-site doctor or nurse or whatever, that's just what we're going to do. The fan component of it, I think that those of you who read the release this morning, there will be no fans for a month, at least a month. And I think if you look at this in reality, how do you then put fans on a golf course in the month of July? I don't know. I wish I had an answer for it. And it'd be great if we could. If the thing just magically disappears, and then we'll get there. But the fan component of it is just going to take a backseat for a while, unfortunately. And the good news is I think that if we can get live sports back on television, and it looks like our platform has the ability to get back out there first, just by the nature of where our sport is played in open environments, and then we have a real opportunity to kind of have a monopoly on live sports for a while. We've been reading about Major League Baseball, the things that are going on there. Who knows? Play Arizona, Florida. I don't know how that works, but they'll figure it out. They have unions to deal with and that kind of thing. Players union and Major League umpires union to appease before they get to that point. And I think we all know the NBA season is done. I don't think Adam Silver has any desire to try to put people back in an arena anytime soon. So we have an opportunity to really be the only live sports on television for a while. And if everything holds in place and we do this right, we reintroduce our schedule or resume our schedule in an appropriate manner and get a little bit of luck along the way, I think we'll be successful in doing that. So, getting off of COVID, that's occupying all of our time. Well, let's jump back kind of a little bit into some of the other changes that we've had to what we do for a living. Everybody thinks, well, gosh, the rules of golf, why does that affect agronomy? Well, it has a lot of impact on what we do as agronomists, in that, a lot of the rules of golf pertain to, obviously, golf course surfaces and whether it's penalty areas, abnormal ground conditions, or anything really we have an impact on how the rules of golf are administered each and every week with respect to the condition of the golf course. We all know hazards are no longer hazards, right? They're now penalty areas. What does that mean? Well, I used to love the fact that they were hazards because we also lumped in bunkers into hazards. And so when a golfer plugged his ball in a bunker, I just said, well, you're in a hazard. We can no longer say that, right? A bunker now is not called a penalty area. It has its own definition. It's always had its own definition, a little modified definition in the latest version of the rules of golf. And so really the biggest change that we've seen with bunker preparation, I'll kind of skip past this slide. This just kind of shows you where you are in and out of a bunker, is that before, a golfer was not allowed to touch a loose impediment in a bunker. Whether it was a stone or a pebble or a rock or a pine cone, if that was between his club and the ball, well, that was just too bad. And we spent a lot of time leading into tournaments, and I'm sure those of you who've worked on golf courses before have probably seen bunkers that the drainage components are falling apart and maybe the liner's falling apart and there's gravel's coming to the surface, and you could try to harvest this gravel or stone out of a bunker and you rake it and get it clean, and then as soon as the golfer hits it in there and his caddy rakes the bunker, these stones surface to the top. Well, that was a big problem. And even though we had a local rule that would deal with it, we did not like to administer or enact that local rule just because it created a lot of confusion from site to site. Now you can remove a loose impediment. So if you get in a bunker and you got a stone or pebble or pine cone, you can take that out. And so it takes a little bit of the pressure off of us to get every single pebble out of a bunker. Now, there's always a law of unintended consequences with these things. And the issue becomes, I'm sure you've all raked a bunker and you see little clods of sand in the bunker and they look like stones. If a player were to move one of those that was behind his golf ball or pick it up and all of a sudden the cloud of sand crumbled, a cloud of sand is not considered a loose impediment. And so therefore the player would be under penalty. And that's just one of those things that players have to be extremely careful before they go and remove something in a bunker. And if they're smart about it, they'll call for a ruling and a rules official will come over and help them identify that. Rule 13.2 now deals leaving the flag stick in the hole. Everybody says, oh, why we change that? Well, in reality, you used to leave the flag stick in the hole back in the 60s and 70s anyway. If you look at, I don't know how many of you stayed up last night and watched the three-part series on Jack Nicklaus. But if you notice, there are flag sticks in the hole all the time while he's putting on the green. The problem with it, from an agronomic standpoint, is that when you're dealing with grasses, these stoloniferous grasses like a Bermuda or a paspalum even on greens, the downhill side, the down green side, if you will, can get real flaky as the day goes on when you sever that crown from that leaf. And all the painting and hairspray, anything you're going to put on the inside of that hole to keep it in place, it's going to fall apart as the day goes on. And in years past, if you have a 156 player field, there's 13 groups per 9, you're only talking about taking that flag out of the hole, 52 times a day. Now, when you're putting the flag in and out and in and out and in and out, you run the risk of, especially in a windy condition, that barrel nicking the side of the hole, and we're having to go back out and repaint cups a little more often. And in some cases, had to change a hole because it's damaged. So that's created a little bit of a challenge from our end, but we're never going back to pulling it out, at least not in my not in my career. And in 13.1C2, players tamp down spike marks. This is one that I do like, and it's because, especially when we get on bent grass surfaces late in the summertime or into early fall that maybe had a really hard summer and they're pretty leafy and they just aren't strong enough yet to really get after them and do a lot of brushing and grooming to get rid of that leaf. Sometimes you have to rely on that extra leaf to provide your surface. And if you introduce rain into that equation, now players, especially those who wear spikes, we still have a lot of players that wear metal spikes, believe it or not, it can create a mess towards the end of the day. So being able to tamp those down is I don't mind that at all. If you think about a guy like Tiger Woods, who won over 80 times, he played 3 out of his 4 rounds every week he played late in the day, right? He would play early on either Thursday or Friday and late on a Thursday or Friday. And then on the weekend, he's in the last group or two. He's playing in the last group. And to think that he made as many putts on spiked up, greens and still won these golf tournaments is just, yeah, it's phenomenal. Yeah, how he did it. A little bit of a philosophy change we've had in recent years in dealing with primary height of cut or rough. Again, this is not some arbitrary number. We just go out there and say, just set it 2.5 inches or 3 inches or 4 inches. We actually look at a lot of data and try and determine what promotes a premium on driving accuracy without being excessive rough. So there's nobody on this call, I wouldn't think, other than Dr. Kaminsky here, and he might even be too young to remember the old V groove back in the irons back in the 70s and 80s. I grew up playing these things, and as a kind of example. You remember that, John?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. It's in the bottom right-hand part of the screen there, and you take a V groove iron and put a blot of ball in your hand, and it doesn't take much grass at all to get between that ball and that groove, and you call it a flyer. I mean, a real flyer. And those of you who've never hit a V groove club with a blot of ball don't understand what a flyer is. If you want to get an example of what a flyer looks like, just go watch a Roger Federer topspin forehand and watch how the ball hits the ground and jumps straight up in the air, and it seems to accelerate after it lands on the ground. That's what a true flyer is. You really can't hit flyers with today's technology, balls and clubs. Anyway, so the V groove was something where we didn't have to have a really lot of deep rough to promote a premium on driving accuracy. If you go back and look at years past, back before the advent of this new technology, you could find back in the 80s and 70s where a guy finished on the money list. There was a direct correlation where he drove the golf ball. It wasn't uncommon to see 4 or 5 top guys on the money list being 4 or 5 top driving accuracy or overall driving matrix for the entire year. And then when the equipment changed and the ball, we got these square groove clubs, that all went out the window. There was really no correlation in driving accuracy and where you finished. BJ Singh won the FedEx Cup title one year, and I think he finished something like 92nd in overall driving, right? And that was back with the square groove. And so what the square groove forced us to do is it forced us to do this. And this is as a perennial ryegrass rough here, but you can see that's a ridiculously tall rough. But that's the only way we could really provide the level of difficulty that we're trying to provide. Now, you can imagine, pardon my French, how pissed off a membership would get leading into the event when you're trying to accomplish a 5 or 6 inch height of cut of rough. This doesn't happen overnight. You're trying to do this, 2, 3, 4 weeks ahead of the game. And so we found ourselves making a lot of members mad, and rightfully so. Nobody wants to play this kind of stuff going into a tournament. Well, the USGA and RNA came back, and this has been about a decade or so ago, and they said, you know what, we're going to do away with the V groove. We're going to go to this U groove, which is in the bottom left-hand part of your screen there. And the thought process was, let's reintroduce flyers. Let's put a premium back on accuracy without having to grow these incredibly long roughs. And so we tested this with at some sites for a couple of years, and I think we all agreed to, all right, let's give this a shot. Let's get the primary roughs at a lot of our sites back down to this 2 to 2.5 inch in cool season grasses, and maybe 1.5 inches, 1.75 inches on Bermuda grass. And let's see what happens. Maybe this taking a spin off a golf ball, guys will try to go for hole locations that are tucked in the ball will fly, and we'll get some excitement and some difficulty that way. And so we did that. And after looking at the data for about a couple, 3 years, we realized that it just wasn't having the U groove did not act like a V groove in really any form or fashion, especially when you introduce the Pro V1 golf ball, right? I mean, the golf ball is where the real impact is this. So we've kind of gone back now and slowly reintroduced, kind of married in the middle, if you will. We're not going back to these 6 inch height of cuts, but we're certainly getting our cool season courses back up to the 3 and 4 inch mark, and in a couple places maybe a little higher. if it's all perennial ryegrass. And then Bermuda grass, I always love my Northeast counterparts and all the Northeast professors and all the turf students. Everybody knows part of the world thinks Bermuda grass is a weed, and you're right. It is in most cases. It can be a weed, but it's actually a very interesting plant, and because of its anatomical makeup, it's a rhizomes and stolons. You can train this plant to do what you really can't do with other plants. I mean, you can take this down to well below 1/4 of an inch. You can grow up to 4 inches, and there's not many plants you can do that with and have a surface. But with respect to rough, for those of you who worked on Bermuda grass courses, you may know this. Those of you who haven't, you may not. But if you go out and try to mow rough, or if you do mow rough at the same height of cut for a long period of time, what happens is you get a false crown, is what we call it. I think Milt Engelke termed that phrase, or coined that phrase years ago. But what happens is the stem will set itself to about the height of cut. Let's say you're mowing at 2 inches, for example. You'll have this crown that'll develop above the ground layer at about the 2-inch height of cut, and from that you'll get really super tight internodes. You'll get a lot of leaf material coming out at that point, and it'll get hardened off as the year goes on. And what happens is the golf ball will sit on top of that, almost like a piece of popcorn, and that's a problem. I mean, that's really not delivering the degree of difficulty that we want, especially if a guy's hitting a long iron into a green. If the ball's sitting up like it's on a TOL, I can hit that shot. And so what I've had courses that I'm assigned do the last 4, 5, 6 years or so, and I kind of developed this protocol. I call it the step down, step up method. But what we'll do is we'll go in, especially these late season Bermuda grass courses that we're playing, and I'll have the sites go in and not do the whole golf course, obviously. But we want to focus on where the golf ball is going to land. So inside the ropes, adjacent to landing zones, and then carry from that area all the way up and around the greens, right? So instead of doing 60 acres of rough, we might do 6 acres. Because what we'll do is we'll go in, and I think, for example, that the rough on the left of your screen there is at about 2 1/4 inches. And then the rough on the right, we had to scalp it down. And this is several weeks before the tournament, about 1.5 inches. And so when you look at it from overhead, it looks like this. Well, that doesn't look very good, right? But what we've in essence done, we have removed that false crown. So now all that material is going to regenerate itself. And once we reset that height to our targeted height, which I think in the case of East Lake is 2.5, and some places it's 2 1/4, whatever it may be. But all that new material that comes out is going to be nice and soft and succulent material. And it's going to be incapable of supporting a golf ball. The weight of the golf ball, when it lands on that, once that resumes, once it develops that new tissue, it's going to sink to the bottom. And so that's kind of the first step to what we do preparing rough. And then we introduce a piece of equipment like this. This is actually at East Lake also. This is just a wood bay rake. There are other versions of this. There's a Terra rake makes one. This is a spring-loaded little dethatcher unit. And you can see it running there. It's pretty simple. And so what we'll do is we'll go right behind that and then mow. And we do that part of the process late in advance week. So we might be doing that Thursday, Friday, Saturday before tournament week. And then we'll mow. And this is what the end result is. So we're trying to encourage golf balls to get to the bottom. Okay. And then that rough there, again, I think it's around 2.5 inch rough. I don't care what kind of groove you have on a mid iron. You're not spinning a ball out of that. If the greens are firm and you're hitting, that's a 7-iron shot, you better land it short of the green. If not, it's going to bounce off the back of the green, again, if the greens are firm. So again, trying to reintroduce premium driving accuracy back into the equation. And I sometimes get a lot of heat for that because and I'm fortunate enough to have the tournament directors I work with allow us to do this at some of my sites. For example, when I don't have the data from last year, but when Rory won the Tour Championship in 2016 at East Lake, it was a 3-way playoff. I think it was Ryan Moore and maybe Kevin Chappell were in the playoff. I think those were the 3 guys in the playoff. Well, those guys in driving accuracy for the week finished 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so mission accomplished is the way I look at that. let's see here, John. If I've got my little timer on here. If you just tell me when I'm getting long-winded and cut me off.
No, you're good. We try to keep it to around 45 minutes, and we've
okay,
got
so about 15 minutes or so, something like that, or you just tell me. So yeah, I'll keep kind of shucking and jiving through this thing here. So bunker preparation and conditioning. When I first came aboard the tour, and what had been happening in the years prior to that is we had really gotten we'd really gotten out of whack with our bunker preparation, and kind of the standard was you cannot get a bad line of bunker. It has to be a perfect lie all the time, which was crazy. And we did all this kind of crazy stuff. We would all this watering and packing every day of advance week, and have some guys go and put hard-true tennis court amendment into the faces. And of course, it ruined the drainage of bunkers over time. But anything we could do to absolutely eliminate the potential for anything other than the perfect lie. Well, with the support of our tournament directors and our player council, we've gotten away from that, right? And so it's not that we try to encourage bad lies in a bunker, but we don't go overboard in discouraging a bad lie in a bunker, right? However, there are some things that we still make sure that we have in place. And first and foremost is some examples of how we used to do things. It was just vibratory tamping every day, and screening sands, and more screening of sand, and to get these kind of conditions. But one thing the things that we really focus on when it comes to bunker preparation, because I hear commentators make statements all the time, and I have to correct the ones that I know and try to get them trained in a different line of thinking. First of all, we'll make sure we have the right sand, right? I mean, there's testing we can do, a lot of different values you look at to choose the right bunker sand based on your design of your bunker. This bunker sand on the left, probably not a very good bunker sand. A lot of the same particle size, some medium sphericity there, not a ton of angularity. The bunker sand on the right would probably be a little above bunker sand, a lot more coefficient uniformity in there, a lot more angularity. And so obviously that's one of the many tests that we have run. I'm not sure how many of you guys have ever seen one of these little things, a full pocket penetrometer. It's not the greatest picture in the world, but it measures, it's just a simple little device that you push down on the ground, and it measures I think kilograms per square centimeter. But what I try to do is, if I can cover up, it's kind of blurry, I don't know if you can see my mouse or not, but there's a 3.5 right there, and there's a 4 there, and a 4.5 there. Well, I'm covering up with that shaft, the 3, and I haven't buried the hemisphere of this golf ball yet. So that tells me that sand is a pretty firm sand. I'm not going to have any problems with a ball disappearing into the face of a bunker with that sand. Now, conversely, you can see here, I haven't even covered the 1.5 yet. And this gives you a little better example of what the device looks like. It's a spring-loaded device, and I'm sure you guys have seen it. It's $100 from Turf. But I haven't even covered 1.5 yet, and look, this hemisphere is buried. This is a horrible bunker sand, and one that we would never approve, because this is what you're going to get. There's a golf ball right there. And so some of the criteria, other than making sure we have good construction techniques and we're using the proper sand, is that we want to make sure a player's golf ball is identifiable when he hits in the bunker. That golf ball right there is not readily identifiable. He's got to scrape some sand away, and then after he identifies the golf ball, he's going to put the sand back before he hits a shot. And then the other thing is we want to make sure a golfer can take a stance. Now, this is what happens, you get guys who hit into a bunker like that. This is actually a picture, I think, several years ago from maybe the U.S. Open at Pinehurst, and that's Ricky right there. And if that slope was a little bit steeper and that ball was a little bit further to the face, Ricky would not be able to take a stance in that bunker. So we don't want that. We want a guy to identify his golf ball, be able to take a relatively fair stance. And then if at the end, of course, we still do some watering and packing and that kind of thing, but at the end, if you get this, that's okay. And again, I go back to some of the commentators from time to time will say, what a terrible lie you had in the bunker, what a bad break. And no, it's really not. Those were designed to be areas of the golf course or feature the golf course you're not supposed to be hitting into. Right? If you're purposely aiming for those, then you're just going to get what you're going to get. So if you ever see a lie like that on TV, nobody made a mistake. Okay, that's acceptable nowadays. So Anyway, I could spend hours talking about bunkers, and we'd all be picking sand out of our ears by the end of the presentation, but I've had enough on bunkers. So, another thing that I get questions about all the time, and those of you who follow golf, we're talking about this driving distance thing, and now in the last year, or within the last year, RNA, USGA, the governing bodies have kind of come together and say, okay, now we have a problem. We need to do something about it. I don't know how at this point you get the toothpaste back in the tube when it comes to the equipment portion of it. You can probably freeze it where it is, but trying to regress is going to be difficult. But one of the things that I do get a little frustrated with is when I see some of the talking heads talking about, well, the only thing that's had an impact on driving distance is the evolution of the equipment. Equipment obviously has a huge thing to do with it. Look back down here in 1986 when Nicklaus won the Masters. The average driving distance on tour. Just follow this red line, by the way. Don't worry about the other lines. It gets kind of a convoluted screen. I apologize for it. 86, the average driving distance was 262 yards. Okay, average driving distance in 18 was over 295 yards. Now, we'll say that last year, I don't have the data on here, but 2019, we actually went down 2 yards in average driving distance. And everybody made a big deal about, oh my gosh, what's going on? Well, what happened is, it kind of goes back to one of my initial points I made in this presentation. We played a lot of additional tournaments, or a lot of tournaments in times of the year where we had thunderstorms. And we played a lot of rain-soaked golf courses during the 2019 calendar year. And so that had a bigger impact of anything. I know that I think most of my sites, other than 2 of my sites, were inundated with rain. We had delays and restarts and playing the ball in hand, that kind of stuff. But when I hear people say it's equipment only, that's not the case. And I think when we talk about what we and there's one golf writer, I won't say his name. He's on Twitter all the time. You probably follow him. Don't know who he is. I've tried to reach out to him multiple times to give him some data and facts, and I guess he doesn't want to let facts get in the way of his point, because he keeps talking about agronomy has no impact on this at all. It's just not true. Now, I will say this: there was a tweet that went out a while back, and I think, John, you might have been involved in this, and it was, somebody made a comment about the height of cuts at all PGA Tour events was a 1/4 inch and below, and that's not accurate, right? Our height of cuts, for the most part, really haven't changed. I've been here 15 years, and most of my sites, I'm still mowing fairway height of cut wise, at least bench setting. In 2020, we're mowing in 2006. Now, let's be realistic though. We've had advances in technology in mower and reel setups. Equipment technicians have gotten a lot better at understanding the engineering piece of these reels, and are able to really get everything in the tank out of a reel that maybe they didn't in years past. And so, our quality of cut has an impact. Less surfaces, simple physics. Those of you, I'm not sure if you take physics class if they or not, but it's, the more surface area, the more resistance you have, the less distance an object's going to travel over that, right? So we have that. Player fitness is another thing that I don't think gets a lot of credit. And I'm not picking on Greg Chalmers. He's a great guy, but if Greg Chalmers walked into one of your bars up there at Happy Valley and sat next to you and ordered a beer, you'd look at him, and the last thing on your mind that you would think about Greg Chalmers was he's a professional athlete. You'd probably say, gosh, the guy can't even bend over and tie his shoes. If I tried to do this, I would pop every hamstring in my quad, or my back of my leg. But all these guys are this flexible, and it's incredible how in good a shape they really are. And if you go, week to week on the PGA Tour, we'll have 2 or 3 of these big, huge semi trucks that come in. These things, the trailers open up, and they're fitness rooms. These guys can work out in each of these rooms during the week, and these things are full of people all week long. Our guys take advantage of them. I love to show this slide. It's Ricky Fowler. He's playing a persimmon wood. And that wood, the last time it was ever used on tour is probably the early 1980s, when the average driving distance was below 260 yards. I don't know if you can see that, but Ricky carried that ball 275 yards with that old persimmon club, and for a total of 292 yards. Well, Ricky would have been over, well, close to 40 yards above the average during the last year that club was played at. He played it. Now was using a modern golf ball, right? But it just goes to show you, how good a shape these guys really are. We talk about water management. You guys know this. I mean, you study this kind of stuff. But for the longest time, we just rely on overheads to water fairways and that kind of thing. And without the technology we had to monitor it, we probably did more of this than we really needed to. And now we do. As far as landing zones and in-play areas, we don't do any overhead irrigation there, right? We hand water only, and this is just commonplace nowadays. Obviously, a drier fairway, ball's going to go further, right? I think this might have been a year when, John, you had some guys there. I think at East Lake, I took that picture. When we design irrigation systems now, when our courses are putting in new systems, we kind of demand, if you will, part circle heads. So we have adjustable heads that keep the rough alive and nice and juicy and penal, and then we can shut off the fairways and not sacrifice the rough. And so we can more direct placement of water, tighter spacing with these kind of systems. And then, other things had a big
difference in this driving distance. I feel strongly about is our increase in cultural practices and the intensity of those things. 15 years ago, if you mentioned fairway top dressing, I'd say 1 out of 50 clubs were even considering it. Maybe 1 out of 100, I don't know. Northeast, you maybe get a little more top dressing because you deal with bent grass, but in the South, it was unheard of. Nobody did it. And now I don't have a site on the PGA Tour that's not applying at least 50 tons per acre of sand during a calendar year. In some cases, up to 80 tons per year. That makes a difference, right? More verticutting. That's again all these things we're so much better at than we were years ago. And so so next time you hear a golf talking head talk about the equipment's the only thing that's had something to do with distance, they're just not right. And we have data to support that with our shot link data as well. And then of course phrase mowing. I don't think phrase mowing really is caught on up there. Probably won't. You don't want to do it to poannular surfaces, but Bermuda grass surfaces, you can set this thing on. I mean, if you guys ever seen one of these things, you can set it down to you can go as deep as you want to go, but you put it at a half inch and take everything off the top and give that about 4 or 5 weeks to grow back in. It's a brand new surface. It's rock hard. John, I can
the last one, Blaine. Go back to that last slide.
Yeah.
How long does it take to fill up that vehicle? I mean, how many passes can they make? Do you have any idea?
Yeah, about one.
I was thinking it's gotta be pretty laborious. So.
Yeah, at that depth, you need to have that's the problem with this machine is what do you do with all the spoil, because it creates if you go at a half inch, if you just go to 1/4 inch, you harvest just an abundant amount of material that you need to have about 4 or 5 of these tractors with trailers just running depending on how long your run is to where you're storing this stuff. But if you want to, if you have purity of surface, in other words, if you have pure uncontaminated grass, and you want to return those fairways to where they were when they were brand new in terms of firmness, man, this is the best way to do it. It is disruptive, and it will take 4 or 5, in some cases 6 weeks. If you go down past a half inch, it's going to take you about 6 weeks to recover from it. But boy, you save yourself from regrassing, every so often. Listen, I could go on for a long time. I'm looking at my stopwatch here, and I see I've hit my allotted time. I've got a lot of the stuff I'd love to talk to you guys about with technology and that kind of thing. I'm sorry I didn't get to that. And if for those of you who are still awake, if you I'd love to if you had a last minute cancellation over these podcasts in the future, I'd love to jump back on it and pick up where I left off, and we can discuss some more stuff. Or you guys have probably heard enough of me and probably never want to see my face again. But for those of you who do, before I flip the questions,
again, Dr. Kaminsky is fantastic at getting you guys and girls out into the field, and you really don't know how fortunate you are to have a professor like him. For those of you who studied under him, I know he's tough, he's demanding, but if you get out of that program at Penn State, you're prepared for about anything. And for those of you who come and volunteer, you're more than welcome. Listen, we love to have you at any site you ever want to come to. Any of the sites that I'm responsible for. If you want to come do it, call me. We'll make space for you. I promise you. And it's a great way, as all of you know, I'm sure, to get out and meet people and network. And if you really pay attention and are perceptive, maybe you're assigned the whole week of raking bunkers. And some people get upset about, I'm raking bunkers, or I'm blowing greens, or I'm doing. Well, keep your head on a swivel. If you look around when you're volunteering at these things, you can see the entire operation. If you're out there in the middle of it, you watch greens mowers and greens rollers and hand waterers and everything else going on. You can learn a tremendous amount. And hey, it's the best 7-day investment you'll make in your career, quite frankly. But listen, any questions? Any questions?
There are some questions. I'll go to Devin first. My former grad student, she had a question, and I had the same question. She said, what's the background of most PGA agronomists? Are they former superintendents? Do they require advanced degrees? How do you get into your job or with the PGA?
Yeah, John, there's really no there's no cookie cutter approach to it. I think that what all of us have in common is we all have at least 4-year degrees, and then we were all superintendents at for the most part higher end clubs. So there were a number of us that were superintendents at tournament golf courses, and in my case, I was a consultant for several golf courses. The Quail Hollow back years ago. When the first Wachovia Championship, before the Wells Fargo Championship, came on board, and did some other stuff with the tour as well. So yeah, it's now they're exceptions of that. Matter of fact, our boss, the head of our department, Paul Vermillion, was never really a golf course superintendent. He was at the USGA green section for a number of years, over 2 decades. And came on board, but for the most part, everybody, you don't necessarily need an advanced degree. You don't need a master's degree, although it's nice if you have it. But I don't know that it's a blend of understanding the scientific component of it, and also the artistic component of it, and then the practicality component of it when it comes to knowing the rules of golf, and so. And I'm not saying anybody with a 2-year degree can't do it. You certainly can. I know plenty of superintendents out there with 2-year degrees who would be extremely successful in what we do. So, yeah. So it's not a bunch of check the box stuff. I guess you can kind of get here a number of ways, but that's kind of a long-winded way of answering your question. I hope I did.
Well, I think that also, things like being around you all and being in tournaments and, like that's what you do. So like, if you don't participate in those things, you're probably not likely going to be seen as somebody that's, on the radar.
Yeah, John, you're exactly right. And if it's because the PGA Tour is over 1,200 employees, maybe more than that now. I don't know how big we are. We're a pretty big company, but when you boil it down to the competition side of things, the people who do the hiring out there, we hire people we're comfortable with, because really there's no training mechanism in place. I mean, you're hired and you might go shadow. And when I was first hired, I shadowed several agronomists for a week each. And I think after my 3rd week of shadowing somebody, they said, hey, you're on your own. Go, take off. Here's your tournaments and go. So we really look for people that have tournament experience, because, we just don't have there's no book to study to do this. There's no kind of protocol. So, but yeah, being around tournaments and getting that, we do hire people who we know. I mean, it is a case of really who you know as much as what you know.
Good. We have other questions, so I'm going to get to them. Someone asked, what's your favorite golf course?
Oh gosh, this is being recorded. I'd make one person happy, and the one I'm working that week.
The one I'm working. That's a good question. I was gonna say I'll bleep it out like so that you say it, but we just bloop right over top of it.
Yeah.
Somebody said, same person, Kurt said, what's the biggest issue or challenge that you've seen at a golf course or maybe a tournament or whatever?
Oh gosh. Phew. Self-induced or induced from somebody from another. I'm trying to think
I mean, it could be something like, the lightning I don't know if that's the biggest, but I mean, I remember seeing that on TV and being like, wow, I'm glad I wasn't there because that's always where I stood.
Yeah. Hey, look, I mean, I don't know if you paid attention, but I think I told you this after it happened, but there was a second bolt that came off, or a finger that came off that main bolt that hit that tree and it hit the Osmac antenna at the maintenance facility. We were all underneath that. I mean, but yeah, as far as it's, unfortunately, like I said earlier, we provide agronomic support to over 150 courses for tournaments a year. And getting through an entire 150 events without having problems, we're going to have problems somewhere. And so I guess there have been instances where we've had, I think probably one of the most challenging weeks ever was probably back at Sedgefield Country Club in 2010. And it was no fault of the club or matter of fact, the superintendent there, Keith Wood, at the time, he's now at Quail Hollow, is one of the best superintendents in the entire country. He's fantastic. But at bent grass greens, which we played a tournament in August and in Greensboro, North Carolina, and it had been the hottest summer on record. And there were golf courses in the area that were closed completely to play because it was just too hot. And the green, if you walked on bent grass, they would just disintegrate. And we put 2,200 people, between pro-ams and players and full field and caddies across those greens during what could not have been a worse week. And we could just see the greens thinning in front of us. And that was a very, very helpless feeling. And knowing that by the time you got to Sunday, we were running out of hole locations because the greens were just dying in front of us. And there was nothing that could be done. That was a bad feeling. It was a real bad feeling. But Keith redeemed himself and came back the next year and gave us great conditions. And they converted to Bermuda grass the year after that, and he was off and running and been perfect ever since. So
yeah, I had a question. Who's the biggest complainer that you got on that player advisory group? Again, recorded, so you don't want to say.
Yeah, no, that the player advisory group, those 20 names I'll put on there, they're really all good guys, every one of them. It's here's the deal. If you take a cross section of society, a full field event for us is 156 players. If you went out and just and randomly selected 156 people, you're more than likely going to have one or two or maybe more that aren't always happy 24 hours a day. And
Phil Mickelson.
Yeah, no, he has no reason not to be happy, right? I think we'd all trade places with Phil. I know I would. No, but here's what you have to remember is that these guys are playing a sport for a living. This is how they make their money. This is how they provide for their families. And of course, the guys at the top of the food chain, they're making tens of millions of dollars a year. Those are not the ones I'm talking about. The guys who are really fighting to keep their card and keep their status. If they're playing poorly, it's not unlike a football player who gets penalized for pass interference and he doesn't feel like he was or a guy who gets called out on strikes when it was clearly a ball outside. They get mad, right? And there's that instant rage. And so you get a guy who's just not playing well. They're struggling to make it. And those guys, it's like any other job. If you're under a lot of pressure, you can snap. And so you get that from time to time. You get players that can get really animated and really, really upset, and they can call you a lot of stuff. The only thing I ever ask players is if we're having a disagreement is don't do it in front of anybody. If it's done in front of a spectator, somebody can hear it, then we've got some problems. And so if you got a problem, let's talk about it. And what always happens in those situations is a guy might blow up in the heat of the moment. Just like I said, a guy who got flagged for a holding penalty, he didn't think he did. And then over, at the end of the round or the next day, the player we always talk about it. He's fine for that. You just have to understand that's just part of it.
Yeah. The other thing, and then we'll probably wrap it up. We're at an hour here.
Brad, I had a question for you.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to, Mr. Cooper, I just wanted to kind of touch base. When you were saying, you kind of touched on it a little bit, but how often are you going to, say if you're getting your sites, how often and early are you starting, planning as far as walking the course and going amongst with the superintendent and kind of planning for the tournament, being prepared?
Yeah, great question, Kyle. It's so for a new event, for example, let's say we're going to play a new site. We'll go in, a year before and approve the golf course, make sure, make any changes we need to make to it. And we might make, 4, 5, 6 visits to that property before we actually play the tournament. Now, once we get to the tournament, each of us will arrive at that golf course the Monday of advance week. So we'll get there Monday before tournament week, and we'll be there for 2 weeks. We stay until we have a winner. So we show up Monday, and then we're there for 14 days. Other courses that we play that have a history at, we may only make 1 or 2 visits there a year before advance week. It's depending on what's going on. If there's a project going on, if we're putting in an irrigation system or redoing greens or something like that, we might be there once every 2, 3, 4 weeks, depending on what's going on. So it's different, but the minimum number of visits we'll make to a site, I guess, would be 2, probably.
And
I've made as many as 14 to one site in a 12-month period.
So I guess that kind of touches my other question is how many sites, when you're given, I guess, throughout the year, how many sites do you have that you visit personally?
I'm responsible for 10 tournaments, and
Okay.
And 2 of those tournaments have multi-courses.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, and so what we on the PGA Tour and PGA Tour Champions, we're there for the full 2 weeks. On the Corn Ferry Tour, we may not be there the full 2 weeks at some events. We might leave on a Wednesday or a Thursday. And so it just depends. But some guys have as many as 12 events. I do. I'm actually assigned 11, but the 11th event is a silly season event. It's a PNC Father-Son Challenge. It's a Champions Tour event with a Champions Tour player and their son or grandson, and we don't. I show up for a visit, do a report, and I don't go back. So technically 11 events, but I do 10 events. If that makes sense.
And so I guess were you personally? I don't know if that's the same people that you work with, or were you at Oak Hill last spring for the Senior PGA Championship? Are you involved with that process?
No. So it's another good question. The PGA Tour is separate from the PGA of America. Okay, and the PGA Tour are golfers who play golf for a living. Tiger Woods, Phil Mickelson, those guys. PGA of America are your club professionals. That's a big organization and obviously have a tremendous impact in golf. The PGA Tour, before Arnold Palmer and Jack Nicklaus broke off, was part of the PGA of America. They broke off in the late 60s and then formed the PGA Tour, which was guys who played golf professionally for a living. PGA of America does 2 events. Well, they're responsible for the PGA Championship and the Ryder Cup, and then, of course, the Senior PGA Championship. Now, we will send rules officials to those events, but we don't provide any agronomic support to PGA of America sites. Yeah. Same thing with the USGA. They have their own green section agronomists at the U.S. Opens. Yeah. And then, of course, the Augusta National does their own. Now, we send 10 rules officials, or maybe more than that now, to Augusta. And we send 10 to the U.S. Open and 10 to the British Open. But as far as agronomic support, we don't do those.
All righty.
I got one last question, then we'll wrap up. Thoughts on golf opening? You announced the tour schedule and modified now. Obviously, things are shifted around. Probably won't be spectators for the beginning, but how do you see all this playing out? I know you don't have a magic 8 ball in front of you, but it's a scary thing thinking about it. I mean, we're all starving for sports, so getting something back would be great. It's just, what's it going to look like?
Yeah, and like I said earlier, what it's going to look like is going to be it's going to be no fans, and there's going to be no build out, and for at least the first month, and so that's going to be kind of odd. But like I said earlier, we can do this if we do it right. I know our people at Planner Vidro, everybody's been working towards that end to make sure that, once again, we get on-site testing. We have protocols in place, simple things like, caddies taking a flag stick out of the hole, or touching a bunker rate. What are we going to do? We're going to hand out wipes on the first tee, or how are we going to handle that, right? Those are all things that we'll have a strategy for before we go play, and it'll be a good strategy. And yeah, it's going to look a little weird without spectators. We've had to do it a couple times in the past several years due to storms. We had it was congressional several years ago. We had a straight line winds came in and made a big mess. I think it was we had to play a day without spectators. So it's going to look a little funny for a while, but it's just the way it's going to be until we get some answers to this thing.
Well, if you're doing it and you don't have any spectators, maybe I'll figure out a way to come volunteer. Although I don't work. Remember that. I just ride around in a golf cart and take pictures of things.
And just so you know, I've spoken to the superintendents who rely on. I spoke to Charles Aubrey here recently, and I asked him about his volunteer, if he's still going to have out-of-town volunteers. He goes, absolutely, and we'll have something in place to make it safe. And now the international portion of that, they bring in some international volunteers. That's going to remain to be seen how that all works out. But yeah, so we'll. If any of you guys want to volunteer for tournaments, we're going to have a system in place that protects you. Okay.
Awesome. Somebody chimed in on the chat and said they live in Colorado and they're wondering if there's any plans or thoughts about bringing different tours to that area besides the Corn Ferry Tour.
I think one of the best tournaments we used to do was International. That was a great golf. That was one of Jack's best golf courses, I think. And I know there's a lot of talk internally of getting into the Denver market, maybe rotating stuff into the Denver market. And the reality is that we have to go play where the money is, where these corporations are located in the cities in which they want to play. And
you mean the pot growers don't like golf out there? There's money in that.
Well, we've kind of released or loosened the reins a little bit. For the longest time we didn't allow alcohol liquor sponsors, and now we allow that. So I don't know. We get enough. Maybe we get some hemp production. But if I can promise you, if somebody in Colorado, a company out there said, "Hey, look, we have we've got." We got $40-50 million sitting around for the next 10 years, $8 to $10 million a year. We want to play an event, and I can assure you, we'll play it in Colorado. It's just that's what it takes. It takes a company that wants to do it in that area.
All right. Well, that was awesome. I'm gonna end it so that we don't go too long, but thank you very much for coming. I appreciate it. You're always been a great supporter of the program, and it's really you kind of that has got us going with some of these volunteer opportunities after we met up at Tour Championship with Arnold Palmer and then TPC Sawgrass. So thank you.
Yeah,
thank you guys. Thank you. I love having y'all there. It makes my job so much easier when y'all come on if I think I do it right. Listen, thanks for having me. And like I said, if you have any last minute dropouts, I'll love to pick up from where we left off.
Yeah, that sounds good.
We can definitely set something up in the fall or something. If you're around to come to State College, hopefully we'll be back there. And
that's what we need.
There you go. I came through the Kaminsky pad.
Yeah, I miss my drinking buddy Bland at the tournament. So. All right, I'm going to end the recording again. Thanks everybody for coming in. All of you that are in the chat here, Kyle and Landon, and all the people that sat in on it. And I'll have this up on YouTube soon. Thanks.
All right.
And Mr. Cooper, thank you again. For everybody else, thank you for